Hi guys, and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today we're going to be taking a quick look at the Vanquisher Sentinel AC I, which was the prize tank for the final four of the Tank Madness. Now I'm not going to look at this quite as much as I normally would with with other tanks. I'm not going to look at it in quite as much detail because a lot of people have got this for free. There's a lot of similarities between this and the Tier 6 Sentinel. And so yeah, I just basically thought I'd have a quick look at the modules and look for weak spots on it, and then I'll talk about the gun and what have you while we get into the matches. Now it's a tier 4 premium for the British. It's an Australian tank though, but it's like the other one, it falls under the British tech tree, but this one has the Commonwealth flag on rather than the Australian one at any point. It does not get preferential matchmaking, so it sees up to tier 6. And for those that didn't win it, it is in the store at the minute. If you got the MVP medal, I think you get 50% off. Otherwise, it's just over 2,000 gold, and it's not a bad little tank. Slightly underpowered on the gun, I would have said, in Tier 6 matches. In fact, slightly underpowered in Tier 6 is a bit of an understatement, to be honest. It's got a quickfire 2-pounder, very similar to the Matildas, but whereas that is the 10B, this is the 10A. So this gets 121 pen on its premium ammo, whereas the Matilda gets that on its standard ammo, and this has 88 pen on its normal gun. I just couldn't quite remember the damage, but it's 45 damage. Very fast firing, low damage gun, like the Matilda, like the Capture KV1. I'll tell you its bonuses as well while we're here, and then we'll just get into the modules and sort of go through a little bit. Like I say, it's not one that I'm going to spend loads of time on because so many people have got it. I'll just go over the weak spots and get into the gameplay. But its bonuses are 26% silver and 55% XP bonus, which is quite a nice XP bonus, and it does make a fair amount of silver. Supplies, well, it's nice and cheap for your standard armour piercing rounds at only 30 silver per round. Your APCR at 1200, which seems quite cheap, and then 15 for your high explosive. That is fairly cheap, and in fact I think with possibly with the silver bonus you might even get away with just using APCR in this thing. Consumables, I've just gone for your standard repair kit, first aid kit, fire extinguisher. If you can hear any noises in the background, I do apologise. It's the pet rabbit, he's out again. And I have got set on firing this a couple of times, hence why I've stuck with the fire extinguisher. Equipment wise, I've gone for the gun laying drive. It's already got quite a good aiming time on this. Again, I'm not going to go into it too much, but 1.9 and 0.37 accuracy can be a bit trolly at range, but the aiming time's nice enough already. But I've gone for the gun laying drive just to improve it. Gun rammer just to make the most out of that awesome rate of fire, and vents just for everything else really, although you could go for coated optics because the view range is about 350 metres, which isn't bad for a tier 4, to be honest. It's about average, I would have said. Crew wise, well, I've got my underutilised snakebite crew in there. I don't go out in the snakebite particularly often. As you can see, I've only got 78,000 on it, and really I should have done the crew up a bit more, but it does go very well in this with it being such a fast firing gun. The snakebite skill really does reduce the dispersion, but if you haven't got one, I would say Sixth Sense, Camouflage, Brothers in Arms, just to improve the aiming time, which like I say already good, and the rate of fire. Also Repairs as well. It's a very, very tough tank in a tier 4 match, and you will get tracked quite often, so Repairs is probably a must on this one. Terrain resistances aren't too savage, but off-road driving might be fairly handy. Smooth ride as well, so you can sort of crack along at a fair old rate and just keep that gun firing and hopefully do plenty of damage. But anybody familiar with the Matilda, basically similar sort of skills that you'd want for that. But yeah, I'd say they're your main ones, and then sort of diversify as you wish really. But Camouflage, Sixth Sense, Repairs, Brothers in Arms, and possibly Smooth Ride, maybe I would have said. But anyway, let's just get into the modules and have a look. Like the Tier 6 Sentinel, it does have a very poor power to weight ratio. Quite an underpowered engine, but quite large really for the size of it. Is like I say, underpowered, but a very big engine there, taking up the rear half of the tank, just like it does in the Tier 6 Power to weight ratio very, very close to the tier 6, slightly higher though at 11.83 as opposed to around 11.4 I think it is. Same top speed, 60.40 kilometers an hour. It can get up there and it can do that, and you know, it just takes a while to do it. Water, soft ground and inclines are your enemy in this though. They really do slow you down to a crawl. You know, I mean, it does have heavy tank power to weight ratio, which is its main downfall, and a 20% chance of fire. Concealment as well, I nearly always forget that one. Not bad actually, 0.27 stationary and 0.21 moving, so it's not too savage on that. Could be better, but yeah, it's not too bad. And you can be very aggressive in a tier 4 match, very, very aggressive. The random destruction I put up the other day showed sort of how much you can bounce in this thing. Like I say, it is very, very tough in a tier 4 match. Not so much in a tier 6. Tier 5, yeah, you can kind of hold your own. But anyway, back to the gun. 20 degrees of elevation, which is quite nice, and 10 degrees of gun depression, which is very nice. So yeah, you can really work the ridge lines in this and bounce even more with the angled front armour. Tracks is quite a lot of gaps. Terrain resistances, they are the same as the tier 6 Sentinel, 1.1, 1.2 and 2.2. Turret on top. Good rotation speed of 44 degrees a second. Oh, and it's 40 on your hull as well, so more than adequate rotation speed. The radio is just in the back of the turret there. 2 ammunition blocks, not overly sizable, but still fairly easy to hit through the side of the tank, if you can pen, that is. And you want to be aiming for basically between the middle and the front of the turret, just above or below the tracks, and there's a good chance you can hit the ammunition racks in it. Crew members, you've got the driver and the machine gunner, or the assistant driver, down in the hull, and then you've got the commander under the cupola, which is quite a small cupola, or it seems on the model view anyway, module view even. And then you've got the loader and the gunner sat up in the turret with him. Now, armour, this is where it gets quite interesting, and you've really got to sort of try and pay attention as to where to pen one of these things, because, like I say, they are very, very tough. Well, we'll start with the turret. The turret is 65mm all the way around. Not quite the whole story, as you can see by the differing colours there, but more or less. And then the hull is 65mm on the front, 45 on the side, and 45 on the rear. So let's have a look at the actual figures though. Well, 1 to 20 are your tracks and the hull floor. And I'm just trying to see, it's a very thin strip, which is the underneath of the engine deck cover, I suppose would you call it. So I don't really know if you're going to be hitting that point at any time. 21 to 30, well, that's the top of the turret and the commander's hatch. A thin strip across the top of the gun mantle. The front deck and the engine deck fall into that category, as does, I don't know what you call it really, upper glacis maybe, I suppose, might fall into that, but it is incredibly well sloped. That's an auto bounce zone there, unless you can actually overmatch it, but I think you'd probably struggle, and more than likely to go straight through the front if you've got enough power for that. Also, just behind the driver's slot and the assistant driver's slot, that angled, that bit of sloped armour there, that also does fall into that category, but again, it's very, very well sloped. Even from the front, I would say that's probably an auto bounce zone of about 70 degrees is your sort of auto bounce. So yeah, again, I wouldn't say you'd have to worry too much about that. And again, if you're using the gun depression, then yeah, it's definitely going to bounce off there. 31 to 50, there's a thin strip around the top of the turret. You can just see it there around the top of the commander's hatch as well. And just a couple of patches on the underside of the turret. So if you get the side of one of these and you're struggling to get through the turret, you want to go for that thin strip just on the underside of it, where it slopes down towards, well, I would say probably towards the turret ring is what you'd call it. The whole side of the tank falls into that category, which it should do because it's supposed to be 45mm, and you can side scrape in this quite well as well with it having the 45mm. I'd say if one of these is side scraping, you possibly want to try and go for that engine deck cover if you're struggling to pen it anywhere where it sticks out slightly, but it is very hard to see because there are the boxes on the track cover, so that does hide it somewhat. The driver's hatch and, well, the driver's viewport, should I say, and the assistant driver's viewport falls into that category as well, as does the sort of front of the upper glacis and parts of the lower glacis, or maybe the transmission cover. I'm not entirely sure what that part is. But again, they are very well sloped. Not quite 70 degrees, but I'd say the driver's viewport and assistant drivers is getting over a 45 degree slope, so that will increase the effective thickness of that quite nicely, and in fact it does. However, that is sort of one of the easier places to pen it at the actual viewports themselves, even though they are slightly thicker armour. They're flat, so you know there's no sloping to it for the effective thickness. 51 to 70, which is your sort of 65mm area. Well, basically the whole of the turret, really. The front of the gun mantle, the front of the, well, in fact, I forgot to mention that the machine gun cover, the coaxial machine gun that's very unfortunately shaped on the turret is, well, it's a weak spot. Yes, that's right, the thing shaped like a penis is a weak spot. I'm sure all men out there are saying, yeah, it is, it really hurts. But yeah, that's probably one of the places that you could pen the turret easier. So yeah, quite unfortunate. I did forget to mention that one. Now, the hull one is not on the damage model, as you can see, but the panel behind it is 65mm thick, but it is flat again, so it might be easier to pen there. It depends on how close you are, what sort of gun you've got, and what your penetration is. But also, like I said before, the driver's viewport and assistant driver's viewport, they might be thicker armour, but they are flat, so if you are struggling to pen because of the angling or whatever, that might be an area to go for. The sort of whole front of the sort of lower upper glacis arrangement also falls into that category, as do a couple of thin strips just inside the tracks and just on the engine cover there, as well as that small box on the back. But yeah, if you're struggling to pen one of these from the front, you can't get through those flatter parts, or you're not tall enough, because if you're a tall tank and you're up against this, you can shoot down onto the upper glacis. It's a good point. You want to try and get around the side of it and go for those thin strip on the top or the bottom of the turret. I would say the lower one is probably the better option for you for that. When you're driving one of these things, you can, like I say, side scrape. Tier 4 matches, you can be very aggressive. Tier 5, you can be fairly aggressive, but you want to stay a little bit back, but you can side scrape quite effectively as well. When you're bottom tier in a tier 6 match, you've got to play it very cautiously and stay back, but the problem you have there is that your penetration on your standard rounds is nowhere near enough to pen a lot of the tier 6s you'll come up against, but you can use your speed to get around on the flanks and try and get shots in at the side and rear. But I tried to keep this a bit shorter, but I haven't, unfortunately, covering all the different bits of armour and weak spots, so I'm going to shut up now. We'll get into the replays and see how it actually handles. Right, so here we are for the first of the replays. It's a tier 5 match. In fact, I think both of them are tier 5 matches, which is nice because it sort of lets me try and show you how to use it when you're not top tier. Like I said in the garage, when you are top tier, you can be quite aggressive in this, kind of like you can in a Matilda. And I know in the random destruction the other day that I put one of these videos up with the Vanquisher, I did say that I felt it could possibly do with a bit of a pen buff. Now, I don't know, that was based on first impressions, and after playing it a bit more, even though in tier 6 matches you can and will struggle with the penetration on the armour piercing against quite a few things up there actually, unless you are, you know, quite close, you will have to fire some premium ammunition. The premium ammo isn't overly expensive, and you do get the silver bonus on this as well, which does compensate for the fact that you're having to fire a lot of premium ammo in tier 6 matches. Now, touch wood, so far I haven't got in many tier 6 matches, so it's not too bad. And I think that if this did have the same gun as the Matilda, or you know, had maybe 100 pen on its standard rounds, I think it may possibly be a bit overpowered, because the Matilda's got that pen, and you know, yeah, it has very, very similar armour, but it's a lot slower. It is a much slower machine, which kind of helps balance it out slightly. It's not very manoeuvrable, so it's quite difficult if anything gets right behind you to sort of, you know, get the front facing it quickly enough. However, this is quite mobile and has quite decent traverses. And as you can see, the tier 5, well, I'm bouncing off the front of this Panzer 3-4. And that's because the angling, I had to go for a weak spot there, but I managed to punch through. Now, if I'd have swapped to my premium ammo, that probably would have gone straight through. Definitely, well, at that range, yeah, I would have said so. Now, against the Panzer 3J, I'm not going to need premium ammunition, especially not this close, but, you know, I did have some help taking down that tier 5. But that tier 5 went full YOLO straight into me, and he ended up dying, and I'm still going. Admittedly, only on 80 health, but let's see what I can do with it. Now here comes the enemy Vanquisher, and you'll notice where I'm going for, just where the assistant driver's slot is, where I said in the garage. And even though he was, you know, he was up on that slope, so his front was angled, it was penning straight through there because of the, well, because it's flatter. It is slightly thinner there as well, but that's roughly where you want to be going for. Now, we've won this corner over. It was looking very dicey at the beginning. I mean, I did wait and look out over the valley, take a couple of shots, because while I was heading towards this corner on my own, and I really didn't fancy going up here on my own. In a tier 4 match, do you know what, I might have just pushed my luck and tried it, but in a tier 5 I thought it best not to. So now we can make our way towards the enemy cap, and this is where I'll pick up a bit of speed. Like I say, inclines really do slow this thing down, as does water. You know, soft ground, you will slow down considerably. More so in water and going uphill than you will on soft ground. On level ground, you can get the speed up fairly quickly. It might take a little bit just to get up to top speed, but going downhill you really can pick up speed very quickly and really get up to a good top speed. And it's that you really need to be using in tier 6 matches. You need to sort of hang back a bit at the beginning of the match, providing support where you can really. Maybe go after the lower tiers if there are any, that sort of thing. And then later on in the match, that's when you want to use that speed to get around the battlefield and get the flanking shots in. Now you'll notice I have switched to my premium ammo. Going up against an M4 at that range, it was a bit iffy as to whether I'd pen him with my standard, and he was on quite high health. I'm not. I wanted to make sure I did pen. Plus, there's a Hetzer and the Duck tank. They're two very tough tanks. Well, the Hetzer from the front, definitely. And the Duck tank as well, the AMX-40. Now I did get a bit annoyed with the KV at one point because he did push me back there. It didn't cause me any shots, but then it was just one of those things where I was trying to get round to get shots at this guy, and just couldn't because the KV kept going up. He wasn't doing it on purpose, it was just me getting a bit, I was in one of those moods. I think it was after he'd shoved me as well. I thought I just got a bit annoyed with that. It was just rude, no need. Anyway, the Hetzer, yeah, I've gone back to premium ammo, and then the friendly Duck tank gets him just in front of me as I take the last shot on the Hetzer and somebody else takes the kill. But not too bothered. These things happen. I'm sure I've done the same to people before, so I can't grumble really. Anyway, yeah, just jumped in it, did a couple of these matches. Not a bad daily double though, 3,500, 824 damage, but this only does 45 per shot. And that was quite, well, it was a fair amount of damage compared to the rest of the team as well. So sometimes you forget when you play in the higher tiers and you get less than 1,000 damage in a tank. Even though it's a tier 4, you seem to think, God, I've done awful in that match. And you just forget how, you know, how little damage some of these guns do down at tier sort of 4 and what have you. And it's just one of those things. In the higher tiers, you're used to getting, you know, like 2,500, 3,500, 4,000 damage, etc. And you know, when you drop down and you forget that, you know, in a tier 3 or a 4, 800 to 1,000 is a good game. Anyway, here we are for the next replay, and it's on port. I do like what they've done to port. I think it's a lot better. The railway in the middle was irritating because you just bouncing across it all the time. It was quite a large open piece of ground, and with the railway, with the train carriages, sorry, it kind of made it very corridorized down there, and you just sort of shot down these long corridors. And taking that away, taking the train tracks away mostly, and adding these buildings in, it really has changed it, and it's improved it a lot. You've still got this open ground in the middle that you've got to try and get across, which can be very dangerous. But this bit up here is a lot better, and it's better for both teams as well. You know, it's better for the enemy team when they actually push up to this point, and it's better for the team starting in the north, in this case, friendly team, because, you know, it's just better. You know, it's not as open. You've not got all the train tracks, and I do much prefer port now as to what it was before. Anyway, I've got a B1 over there. Another little tough tier 4 tank as well. Not so much from the side. It was 50-50 for me to go through, but managed to pen, which was quite nice. And I'm going to move my way along here. I'm going to try and use my gun depression, but I think these slopes are a bit too... yeah, they're too much. I can get up here. I am using it slightly, but I am quite exposed. I managed to get one through the side of the tank destroyer, and then he's gone back. And then I do some very dodgy aiming because I couldn't quite see that slope there that the B1 was behind. I do still get that sometimes. It's with the, you know, the semi-transparent foliage that was there, and the colour of the grass and the slope. It just sort of blended for a second until my eyes adjusted, and I managed to get a hit on him though, so quite happy. Pulled back off there without taking any damage. Did take a bounce, I think it was, but like I said before, tough little tier 4 tank this. And even though it shares a lot of similarities between the tier 6, in fact I think it's almost the same armour profile, if not exactly the same. Or at least the same values, I think it is. From memory, I might be getting that completely wrong, but I'm sure it is. You do play them in a very different way, because this is lower tier. Obviously 65 mil of armour down at tier 4 is a very different value from at tier 6. Now I led the T-34 a bit much there. I thought he was going to carry on forward. And even here on the side you can see some of them are bouncing off his armour. But somebody managed to take care of him, and it can be a slightly frustrating gun because of the low damage. You do have to put a lot of hits into somebody to take them down, especially tier 5s and 6s. I'm just not managing to pen the Su-85, but then he disappears and I managed to pen it. I do take a bit of a beating from RT and from the Su-85. However, I'm putting some shots in it to where he was, and I don't think they were bouncing. I think he's basically... well, I thought he got fed up of me dinging off his hull and decided to back up a bit, so... but I don't think he has. But I've taken the opportunity for me not to be spotted to basically get the hell out of there and get down here into the buildings. Now, I'm assuming it was that heavy over near the bridge that had seen me. So I'm going to weave fairly erratically through the buildings to try and throw off any indication of to which way I was going, and I was going to come round on the tank destroyer, but he's been destroyed, so I will console myself with taking out Artie. But I've got to be very careful because I'm on very, very low health. He could have shotgunned me. In fact, he could have possibly rammed me to death and maybe survived that. I know I've got very good armour, but I'm very low health. And that was a close one from this RT. And I'm risking it here, but I thought, do you know what the hell? Just go for it. Go for the ram. Yeah, totally worth it. And now there's just one enemy heavy left on the team, and I think we'll skip to the end and see how I actually did. Right, well, not surprisingly, that one was a victory. There was only one lone enemy heavy left on the enemy team. But yeah, quite a nice one. Again, 933 damage done. 2087 XP. That's been no ops, no extras, nothing else. So, yeah, not a bad match. Quite happy with that one. But there you go, the Vanquisher AC I. I didn't get to show it you in a tier 6 match, but if you look back at Sunday's random destruction, I think it was number 74, you'll see it in a tier 4 match and how aggressive you can be in it. And I'll try and do a bit of tier 6 gameplay and pop it up in another random destruction over the next week or so, just so you can get an idea of how you might do best in a tier 6 match. But I think with the tier 5 matches, it gives you a good idea of how to play it, and if you just play, like I say, a bit more cautiously than that in a tier 6, and a bit more aggressively than that in a tier 4, and you shouldn't go far wrong. But there you go, I hope you've enjoyed that episode anyway. And I'll be back tomorrow with another video, so until then, take care out there, and I'll catch you next time. See you later.